Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and I finally checked out Toy Story 5, the newest installment in Pixar's long running animated franchise that is extended longer than it needed to. And Toy Story 5 is a movie that I've been very negative on the existence of ever since it was announced. I still firmly believe Toy Story 3 should have been the ending. Toy Story 5 was not that great, so I really was not looking forward to getting more. And overall, this movie felt exactly like a product. A movie that they were making because Pixar needed to make $1 billion this year, so this was their solution. But then the initial trailer started coming out, and suddenly I became kind of interested in this movie, as it really seemed like they had a good idea for the story, and it seemed that a lot of the ideas they had went into this movie, and they actually were not making it just because they needed to make a new Toy Story. It was they actually had a story they wanted to tell, which kind of put some confidence in me for this movie. And then I started to think about it more, and I came to the realization that we've actually never gotten a bad Toy Story. Yes, Toy Story 4 is easily the worst in the series, but I still call that like a solid 6 out of 10 film. It's the only one of the franchise I'm not huge on, but I still think it's not a bad movie critically. And overall, people going into Toy Story 5, people have been pretty positive about this movie. And so here's my thoughts on the film today. So today, we're going to give my review on Toy Story 5. So without further ado, let's jump into the discussion on the film and let's talk about why the Toy Story franchise is truly timeless. So, the basic positives that I have when it comes to Toy Story 5 is first off, the story itself. The entire premise of the Toy Story franchise is the fact that it makes you nostalgic for your childhood and realize why toys are an important part of growing up and how that they're always going to be a part of your lives. And Toy Story 5 really upholds that premise as the modern day, of course, at least, toys are slowly becoming less and less played with by kids just due to the fact that we now have the internet and iPads, which is the entire premise of the movie that Bonnie gets an iPad for the first time and it becomes a story about does technology really replace toys and the memories you can replace with the memories you can make with them. And it even involves a really fun story about the toys and the technology learning to coexist with each other and the fact that both of them have their own uses, which genuinely, that's actually a pretty good premise, and the movie executes it pretty well, I'll say. The plot overall makes very much sense, and there's a lot of scenes in this movie that include the classic Pixar schmaltz that is meant to tug at your heartstrings, make you feel things. And I'll admit, there are a lot of scenes in this movie that definitely stand alongside some of Pixar's greats. Overall, the story of this movie is really, really solid. And overall, I also love that this movie finally puts Jessie in the limelight. As, of course, Jessie to me has always felt a little bit like a side character, even though she's usually promoted as the third face of this franchise behind Buzz and Woody. And she kind of has always felt like very much a side character, as she's very much the side character to Woody's story in Toy Story 2. And then she is the side character again in Toy Story 3 because Woody gets most of the screen time in that movie. And then she basically is just not used in Toy Story 4 at all. So I was really happy to get a movie focused on her this time. And in fact, they do a lot of really great things to expand on Jessie's backstory that was very limited to Toy Story 2. And it very much means that the movie really worked for me and for Jessie. And overall, Buzz got a very prominent plot line that was very nice. And overall, the plot of the story of the Toy Story movie is just genuinely really good in this. And I was really shocked that I actually had a really good time with this movie, especially with lots of the early teasers and that not really grabbing me. So that was actually kind of shocking coming out of this movie. So I mentioned in the intro that while I was very negative on Toy Story 5's existence from the very beginning, the early trailers for this movie really instilled me with some confidence, and it made me really interested to see the movie, mainly because of realizing it was going to be Jesse's film. But then they also had some issues. I'm going to admit one of the biggest issues everybody had going into this movie is the fact that Woody came back. The Toy Story 4 was entirely focused on Woody, and it finished that movie with Woody leaving to go off into the world to be a lost toy with Bo Peep. And genuinely, it felt like in the moment, okay, Woody is now done. His story is complete. We're not gonna need him anymore. But then the first trailer and then we got early concept art and the first teaser trailer for Toy Story 5, which just included this shot of Woody and Buzz together. And genuinely, when everybody saw this, we all had the collective opinion of why is Woody back? It really just generally feels like Pixar didn't have confidence in the film, and it just meant, oh, they couldn't do a Toy Story film without Tom Hanks's name on the poster and Woody's face. But to my utter shock, that second trailer then came around and explained why Woody came back. And then that's what they talk about in the movie. And actually, they make it work of him coming back, as they still keep him as a lost toy, him being out in the world with Bo Peep and the crew, and them now rescuing lost toys because there's so many more of them now because of the iPad technology taking over. And okay, that's an interesting premise. And then Woody comes back because they established that Jessie has this walkie talkie that she's been using to secretly talk to Woody, and she calls him for backup. And then once Woody shows up in the narrative, he really is kind of a side character in this film. Like, he's definitely still a very prominent lead, but he's probably third most important behind Jesse and Buzz. And and then the film ends with him leaving once again to go off again with Bo Peep. And I think that makes it in a way that I actually wasn't mad about Woody coming back, as it means that they did a fun story, that they don't undo his story from Toy Story 4, which is probably one of the only things I like about Toy Story 4. And they make it work for this new film and don't have Woody take over screen time from Jesse or Buzz, which I think makes it okay in my mind. And now that they've obviously set up the whole idea that Jesse has a walkie-talkie to talk to Woody, it means that when they eventually make Toy Story 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, then they can have a reason for why Woody could continue to come back. But then the other problem that the trailer instigated in me that really made me interested in this movie was the lily pad character, as I didn't really see her being an interesting villain, just the idea of an iPad that's trying to get rid of the toys because it wants to take over as Bonnie's new lead, and I didn't see them redeeming her in any sense. But then I watched the movie, and she was actually a really solid villain. As I really like that they went the route of kind of almost like anxiety from from Inside Out 2, where it's a new toy or a new person in the room that believes it knows what's right for Bonnie until it gets proven wrong, and then it needs to work with the toys to do the right thing for Bonnie. And that's such an more interesting story than if they just made her an outright villain. It's kind of more of a misunderstanding, and it makes for her to actually be a really interesting character and actually a pretty good villain for the story. Like, I'm gonna be honest, she actually is pretty good in this movie. But I now actually have some real problems to talk about with Toy Story 5. First off, one of the pretty big ones that I have to call it right away is that we actually went through an entire Toy Story movie without playing You Got a Friend in Me once. You, Pixar, for that, by the way. Instead, we get a new Taylor Swift song in the movie, and it genuinely feels out of place. And it really just feels like it's there because they wanted a Taylor Swift song in the movie. So that's great, of course. And then there's also this subplot in the movie about they have these Buzz Lightyear toys that are now high tech and have these new technology pieces. And it really feels like it was just shoehorned in there for comedy because it never intersects with the main plot until the very end. And genuinely, it feels like it's just becoming ridiculous that they need to do every Toy Story movie. We need to have a Buzz Lightyear that thinks he's a Space Ranger instead of a toy because Toy Story 1, that's the entire premise. Toy Story 2, we meet Belt Buzz. Toy Story 3, Buzz gets reset. It's like, why do we need to keep doing this bit? Like, I feel like it's starting to get kind of old, in my opinion. And there also is a case that this movie breaks off into a couple subplots. That means that the second act of this film is a little slower because you have Jesse and Bullseye go off on their whole subplot. Lily has a whole subplot. Buzz and Jesse have their Buzz and Woody have their own subplot, and it kind of leads to the movie feeling a little slow, especially with the high tech buzzes, where it feels like there's a lot going on, and it means the second act is really slow. And the other main issue I'm going to give is the fact that basically all the other toys besides Buzz, Jesse, and Woody are sidelined hard in favor of them. As there's this bit earlier in the movie, which we saw in the trailer, which was Lily Pad tries to get rid of the toys, so she has them thrown in the garage. And basically after that, it's only Buzz, Woody, and Jesse that get any focus, which for some of the toys, that's probably better because I mentioned in my Toy Story 4, in my ranking of every Pixar movie, that I'm starting to find Forky kind of annoying. So kind of was happy he wasn't in much of this movie. But for the rest of the toys, it was a little sad. And even some of the voice actors have started to get replaced because of some of the actors passing. And I'm sorry, the new Mr. Potato Head voice actor does not sound like Mr. Potato Head. Like, I don't know how they managed that. And it also means that for the sake of sidelining the old toys, we introduce this whole set of new toys the where we have this whole set of new toys, which are these technology themed toys that Jesse meets up with, which are fine characters, I guess, and play into the movie's theme, but I kind of wanted to see more of the original cast instead of all these new characters. But genuinely, those are my only critiques. Toy Story 5 was actually way better than I was expecting it to be, and it had way less issues than I thought it was going to have when I went into that movie theater. And if I'm being honest, Toy Story 5 is probably been one of my biggest surprises of the entire year, as it's a movie I did not anticipate liking at all going into that theater, and somehow I came out actually really liking it. And I'm going to have to give Toy Story 5 an 8 out of 10. I really was impressed with Toy Story 5, and it genuinely felt pretty good, as the movie was obviously better than Toy Story 4, which is thank God, but it's definitely nowhere near the height of the original trilogy. But at the same time, it still was an enjoyable film, and I had a great time with this movie to the point where, honestly, at this point, I actually am kind of on board with getting more Toy Stories because we obviously know we're going to get more at some point because let's be honest, Pixar and Disney are never going to let this franchise die. But I think now that I've seen what they can do and they have new ideas set up and all that for the future of the series, and I genuinely am kind of on board with getting more now. So I definitely will not be as against Toy Story 6 when they eventually announce that. And overall, Pixar is kind of on fire this year with both this and Hoppers. So honestly, Pixar is starting to get back on top again with making top tier movies. So that honestly is pretty impressive. So without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this review. And I want to know if you have seen Toy Story 5, let me know what your thoughts on the film were down in the comments. But without further ado, thank you guys very much for watching this video. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.